Good Thursday evening, everybody. It is 7:30 p.m., which means it is time for the Lions Grid. I'm joined today by Mr. Jeffrey Raymond. Jeff, how are you doing on this Thursday?
Well, I felt better health-wise, but I am very happy that we've gone into a bye week with the 6-2 record, and I don't think I've ever experienced that in my life. So we're doing good.
It feels pretty good. Currently sitting as the number 2 seed in the NFC. It's good times. Rebounded a little bit there after that disappointing game against Baltimore, but all things considered, it's a pretty good week to be a Lions fan. So, we'll kick things off today, like we usually do, as we run our way through as we grind the grid and take a look back at what happened all here in Week 8 of NFL action. Glad to have you with us, Edward. And without any further ado, let's kick it off and take a look at the games from Week 8. Of course, things started off on Thursday Night Football last week with the Bills beating the Buccaneers 24-18. Kind of funny there that the Buccaneers, when they played the Lions, were in first place in the NFC South and are currently sitting in third spot after losing, I believe it's 3 in a row there the Buccaneers have dropped. So we'll have to see if they can get things turned around, going the wrong direction there for Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then what might have been the worst game of the week, and we'll talk about that later, was overtime, the Jets winning the Battle of New York 13-10. Of course, the interesting thing there being it's the Battle of New York, but that game's played in New Jersey. Just saying. Matter of a point of detail. And then a AFC matchup, we had the Jaguars beating the Steelers 20-10. We had a matchup between two NFC East opponents, and I'll say this about the Commanders: they give the Eagles everything they want and more out of games. They kind of make them close, but the Eagles getting the win, 38-31 in that game against Riverboat Ron and the Commanders. A game that was not close: the Dallas Cowboys hosting the Los Angeles Rams. The Cowboys winning that 43-20. An NFC North matchup between two would-be usurpers for the Lions' crown currently as the kings of the NFC North. The Vikings getting that win 24-10. It was their third straight win, but as we'll discuss, they do lose Kirk Cousins in that game.
Such a shame.
As Spartans, it is, we like to see Captain Kirk do well, so it is unfortunate for him there. But we'll talk about that here in just a minute when we do our buy or sell segment. And then the Titans getting a win over the Falcons 28-23 as Will Levis comes out and throws 4 TDs in his debut. Then we had a AFC East matchup, and the Dolphins getting the better of the Patriots in this one, 31-17. We had a matchup between the Saints and the Colts, which was actually a pretty good game. They were kind of trading blows back and forth. But unfortunately, the Colts defense was not playing very well, so the Saints ended up winning that game 38-27, were able to pull away. Then in a matchup between two first-round draft pick QBs, we had the Texans and the Panthers finally getting their first win of the season. Bryce Young getting that monkey off his back. He now has a win as a starting NFL quarterback, 15-13 the final score there. Another good game from Sunday was this game between the Seahawks and the Browns. The Seahawks ended up winning that game at home 24-20, but that was a pretty good game. I enjoyed watching that one. And then the Bengals winning their third game in a row, 31-17 over the 49ers, and the 49ers dropping 3 games in a row there. So the 49ers going the wrong way. And what may be the most surprising outcome of any game this season, the Denver Broncos beating the Kansas City Chiefs at home 24-9, breaking a 16-game losing streak to those Kansas City Chiefs. We'll talk about that one more here, but that was definitely, I think, a big surprise for me. The Ravens beating the Cardinals 31-24. The Cardinals are now the only other team besides the Carolina Panthers with only 1 win on the season. The Bears, they did not continue their hot streak. They are back to being in the loss column as they drop a game 30-13 to the Los Angeles Chargers. And last but not least, on Monday Night Football, as we talked about, the Lions defending the Den, getting that 26-14 win. And as we'll talk about here in the buy or sell segment, or as we look at our hot butt segment, rare time that the Lions were on the opposite side of a regime-changing loss. So we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a few seconds. Well, that's everything that happened in Week 8 of the NFL action. Jeff, anything there that was super surprising for you?
I think the 49ers, another slide there. I figured that they would kind of come back. I didn't expect them to lose 3 in a row this season, but they're looking more and more beatable, is what I'm thinking. They're sitting at the top, but that one, and then definitely the Will Levis coming out party, even 4 touchdowns passes, some rocket throws he was throwing. Those 2 games caught me off guard for sure.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. They're right now the Seahawks are currently sitting as the number 1 team in the NFC West. So it's going to be interesting to see how that whole thing shakes out. Certainly wouldn't have thought that a few weeks ago, but that's why we take things week by week in the NFL, and we sort of adjust as things unfold, because you never quite know what's going to happen.
Any given Sunday.
Exactly. There's a reason that saying exists. And so we'll head now into our buy or sell segment for this week. And as promised, we're going to start out here talking about that Kansas City loss to Denver. Are you buying or selling that it is the biggest upset of the season? And, we already talked about it. Kansas City had won 16 straight against Denver. Patrick Mahomes himself as a starter was 12-0. Mahomes had won 13 straight games against divisional opponents. So that's the Chargers, the Raiders, and the Broncos. Was 13 wins against them in a row. He broke a streak of having 35 consecutive games, regular season and playoffs, throwing a touchdown. And then the Chiefs hadn't lost by more than 4 points in 40 games. And, they lost that game, again, 24-9 to the Broncos. So, Jeffrey, are you buying or selling that loss by Kansas City to Denver is the biggest upset of the season?
I'm absolutely buying this. Denver, although their defense has been playing a little bit better the past couple weeks, they made KC look pretty human out there. Mahomes did have an illness, a flu or something, and as Edward said in the comments, there was no MJ Michael Jordan flu game out of him. Didn't throw a touchdown, got that loss. But yeah, he didn't look right, and I think that if you play this game 9 out of 10 times, the Chiefs are going to win in this season for this team that got 70 dropped on them several weeks ago. But they just didn't look good. And the Broncos were playing some Taylor Swift at the end of that game as the game ended. So a little bit of salt in that wound.
Well, when you've lost 16 straight to a team and you finally get that win, you're going to want to, there's going to be some, you're going to want to enjoy that while you can. I can respect that. And yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think I'm buying on this one as well. There was another stat that they had during the broadcast too, where Patrick Mahomes was like 34-0 or something like that against some teams that with a losing record. So he historically throughout his career has beat the teams he's supposed to. So, there were a lot of records that were, or a lot of streaks and records and stuff that were snapped in this game. Heading into this, there was no reason to think Kansas City wouldn't win the game. And then Denver came out and won. And it's definitely a shocker there. Not as much of a shocker because of, I think, a lot of people. I know I had Cincinnati was my preseason pick for the AFC in the Super Bowl, but the Bengals are back, or are they? Are you going to buy the fact that with riding a 3-game winning streak, are Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals back in this one? What are your thoughts here, Jeff?
Oh, yeah. Joey B and the Bengals are back. This is the first game he's looked actually healthy. He was very mobile in the pocket. He juked out a defensive lineman in there for a big gain. He's very elite at mobility, his pocket presence and his mobility in the pocket, around the pocket. And it was clearly hampered by that calf. And the calf, it throws off your throwing motion. It throws off the kind of velocity you can get on your throws. And he just didn't look right. But this was the first game where I'm like, oh, he's back. He's back, baby.
what the difference a bye week can make.
Yeah,
I'm there with you. Joey Burrow looked good, and I
their
think it's
defense
gonna.
is playing good too.
They are, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think right now when you look at the AFC North, there's a lot of competition there. I don't think there's any one of those. Each one of those teams right now is above 500 with their overall records. With of course the Ravens sitting on top. I don't think it's necessarily going to be an easy task by any means, but I think there's definitely a chance. I think of the three teams there, the Steelers are probably the one team that's going to be headed the opposite way, based off what we saw this weekend. Kenny Pickett struggled a little bit and he got injured. He took that shot to the ribs. So, I would expect that the Bengals, it is a good time for them to move up, but it's not going to be easy. So we'll have to see how it plays out. Let's see what Ed Hare has to say about this one. He's going to buy it.
Oh yeah.
Thinking they've turned it around, got a little more organized here, and get those cigars ready because it'll be time to be lighting them up as they're headed to the Super Bowl. Next up, Jeffrey, for you, we have again. We already talked a little bit about the injury to Kirk Cousins, and we'll actually circle back around to it and take more of a Lions centric view at this. But just from the Vikings standpoint, are you buying or selling the fact that their season is over now that Kirk Cousins is out for the remainder of the season with that torn Achilles?
I'm buying this. I know Justin Jefferson's about to come back, but Kirk was absolutely balling out, bailing them out of several situations in the game. And even while he was balling out, they were on that losing streak in the beginning of the game. They did trade to get the Pastronaut, Josh Dobbs, but I don't think he's going to be as productive at Kirk Cousins is, obviously. So I think their offense is going to suffer. Their offense is really what was keeping them and winning them games. So I'm definitely buying this. As far as our outlook for the division, I think we are by far clear the best team.
Very good point. We'll have to take a look at the. We'll revisit that idea of what it means for the Lions here in just a minute. And Edward saying that it's a buy and that the Lions better have it wrapped up by week 14. Yeah, I mean, obviously, Kirk Cousins has been playing well. I think it's going to be really interesting now to see what happens. Obviously, there was a lot of speculation about whether or not he would be signing with them in the offseason, whether they'd be, franchise tagging him, what sort of would be happening at that QB position for the Vikings. And the fact that he doesn't get to complete the season, it was interesting because, there was a lot of talk out there, a lot of chatter about, potentially him being traded and things like that before the deadline and sent to a contender and things. But yeah, with this injury, it's going to be, it sort of changes that narrative. So we'll have to see how things play out later on.
Kevin O'Connell mentioned that he, after talking to Kirk Cousins after his surgery, that he seems confident that he wants to come back. Now, I know he's 35 years old, but he's been an Iron Man his whole career, so injuries have not been an issue. Now, ACL is probably the most devastating of injuries, I'd argue, but I think he could come back and have a decent season. I think he's got a couple seasons left in the tank.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he'll be back. I'm just curious about which jersey he'll be wearing.
Yes,
when he returns. I think that's going to be the interesting thing for me. See which team may be willing to roll the dice on an older quarterback coming off an injury. Speaking of QB injuries, we saw Tyrod Taylor get knocked out of this game between the Jets and the Giants. Zach Wilson was in there the whole time, but the Jets only managed to score 13 with some of that coming in overtime. I'll come out here and start first. I'm buying the fact that this was absolutely the worst game of the season. It was a terrible game. Both teams looked awful. Both defenses looked actually pretty good because they were out there and forcing the opposition to either punt or turn the ball over on a very regular basis. But Jeffrey, what are your thoughts here about the game, the battle for New York between the Jets and the Giants? Were you a fan of what you saw this weekend?
I do like beautiful disasters, and this game was a beautiful disaster. Now, it was on the more boring end, I'll give you that, but the ending was pretty nuts. I can't believe the Jets keep falling forward, to be honest with you, and where their record is where they're at. I mean, Zach Wilson is not giving you devastating mistakes, but he's still making mistakes, but yet they still are winning these tight games. I mean, when he clocked that ball, I thought they were going to run out of time. They got it. It was nuts. But yeah, I you know what, I'm buying this. I think it was an ugly game, and I do like beautiful disasters of games. So.
Well, it's funny you should mention that as the Jets do keep winning. We know Aaron Rodgers is trying to make some superhuman recovery. If they keep on winning, you never know what could happen come playoff time. And Edward here is going to be selling this one. Watching the Lions and the Ravens, that was pretty atrocious. But it was bad from a Lions fan perspective. But it was at least, I mean, there's no denying that Lamar Jackson and that Ravens offense it was electrifying what you were seeing out of them. You were at least seeing one team execute at a very high level. Nobody was executing very well in that Giants Jets game. So, yeah, as Lions fans, it was a tough pill to swallow and kind of a pitiful performance by our team. But the Ravens, on the other hand, they looked the part. So at least somebody in that game looked like an NFL team, whereas that Jets and Giants game, I'm thinking you could have taken a good college team and maybe made a run at them. Speaking of college, we have the recent rookie, recent college graduate, rookie quarterback, Will Levis. Do you think he'll be able to build upon that impressive 4 TD debut for the Titans, Jeffrey? Are you going to buy or sell that? Is this debut going to be the beginning of the career, or is it going to be the highlight of the career, I guess?
I'm saying beginning of the career. I mean, as far as like his like physical attributes, they're kind of off the charts. He almost reminds me of Josh Allen, except a little bit more raw, probably. But I mean, I say raw, but he was throwing some absolute dimes down the field. And it was like he made DeAndre Hopkins relevant again in this game. And Tannehill has not been able to do that. And the backup quarterbacks have not been able to do that for Tennessee. And he like lit their offense on fire. So I'm absolutely buying this.
Yeah, I think having DeAndre Hopkins as a tool, as an asset, I think D-Hop is still one of the best receivers in the league. His stats might not back that up, but in terms of his ability to run routes, to know what defenses are doing, to get open, to catch the football, I mean, he is still one of the best receivers, I think, in the NFL. And so Will Levis having the skill or having the ability to get him the ball, it's like having you may only be a 70 overall quarterback or whatever, but having a 90 overall receiver that you're throwing to, it's going to lift you up a little bit there. So I'm going to buy it and say he'll be able to build upon it. This may, when I say build upon it, I think he'll be able to become, to your point, Jeffrey, I think Allen is a good comp. And I think that he may be able to be successful like Josh Allen has. Now, obviously, Josh Allen hasn't won a Super Bowl yet. So I don't know if Will Levis is going to come out and be, challenge Tom Brady for GOAT or try and take over the number 1 QB spot in the league from Patrick Mahomes at the moment. But I think he can definitely be a relevant QB and certainly, maybe have these 4 touchdown days be something that happens on the regular. So I'm excited to see what happens with Tennessee.
Selfishly, I want him to do real well because the rest of my fantasy season rides on him because I had Kirk Cousins and he went down.
I did see you added him, and we are playing each other this week in fantasy.
We are.
So he needs to take a week off and then he can come back. So hopefully here Edward's right, and that last week will be the highlight of this season for him, and then he'll continue to build the learning and experience. So we'll have to see how that plays out because it's I got a lot of people on bye this week, so it's
kind of a rough week.
We need some help. Next up, it was a busy trade deadline. A number of trades went down. Jeffrey, of the trades that were made so far this season, which one are you going to buy as being the most impactful, and which one are you going to sell as being not so impactful?
I have 2 buys and a sell, actually. My first buy,
buys.
Yeah. So I think Josh Dobbs going to the Vikings is a good trade for the Vikings. I think they'll kind of be middling because of that. I think going with Jaren Hall, although developing a rookie is something that's there and that they could go with. I think their idea is that they want to still win some games, and Josh Dobbs has been playing well despite the Cardinals being 1-7. My second bye kind of affects the Lions a little bit. Leonard Williams to the Seahawks. Now the Seahawks are top of their division right now, and they have the head-to-head win against us, and they just got a little bit better on their team, and so I think that the Seahawks could be a problem for us. Going into the playoffs if we have to play them. Hopefully we can play them in Detroit, but that's not a given because they beat us in our own dojo. So, that one I think could lead to some potential ramifications later. And then I'm selling Montez Sweat to the Bears. Montez Sweat is in his last year of his contract. They traded a second-round pick for him, and then they're going to – well, they didn't say that – they would sign him or try to entertain the idea of signing him long-term after that. They were like, well, we'll kind of see how it goes. And it's like, that's a lot of capital for a team that's kind of, they stink. They're in a rebuild. Mm-hmm. Like, why are you signing high-level talent when you can't really do anything with them? And he didn't even seem like he was too excited to be there either. He's like, I'm going to keep my options open. So it's just a head-scratcher for me. So I'm selling that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Their second-round pick is almost a late first-round pick.
Yeah,
they're right there right now. So, and I think that's one of the reasons why the Lions maybe weren't able to match a trade offer for someone like Montez Sweat, because of the fact that the Bears' second-round pick is almost a first-round pick, whereas if the Lions continue on the path they're going, their second-round pick is almost a third-round pick. So yep. They're definitely not carrying the same weight there in terms of the draft pick availability. And I'll copy you here, Jeff. I'll do 2 buys and 1 sell. My 2 buys are going to be Chase Young to the 49ers, just because I like Chase Young. I know there was some talk about, his effort and him being sort of selfish and things like that, but he's going to a 49ers team that already has great pass rushers, and they're just adding another guy. So now you already have to deal with Bosa. You have to deal with Armstead. You have to deal with all their linebackers. There's just another fresh body that they're going to be able to send at QBs, and that's terrifying. The other one is Kevin Byard to the Eagles. Obviously, they lost Gardner Johnson to us in free agency. They were looking to shore up that secondary, and their farm team, Tennessee, stepped up, got them the goods.
They can't keep getting away with this.
They're just taking Pro Bowlers away from them, and it's kind of disgusting. And then my sell is going to be Mecole Hardman to the Chiefs. Like, they chose, or he left to go to the Jets in the offseason. They traded for him back. I think that offense needs more help than just Hardman. Now, it's nice that he has the familiarity with the system, with Patrick Mahomes and everything like that. But like, when you have receivers that are supposed to be available, and maybe it was just that Denver didn't want to trade them, Cam Sutton or Jerry Jeudy, but I think you need a player that provides a little more spark, especially because you haven't really had anybody besides Travis Kelce there since you traded away Tyreek Hill. I don't think Mecole Hardman really gets them over that hump. And so I think there's still, usually Patrick Mahomes is good enough to make whoever he plays with look pretty good. But when he's got a flu, I think he needs a little bit more talent out there, as shown. So it would be nice to see them add a little more talent around him. Because he is, I think right now they really haven't done him any favors in terms of the receivers they've brought in. Speaking of strengths of teams, we'll shift now to more Lions-focused buy or sells topics. Is running the strength of this Lions offense? In this game against the Raiders, Gibbs and Reynolds combined for 222 yards rushing. They averaged 5.7 yards per carry. And Gibbs himself, we talked last week, we had the buy or sell about his return. He built upon that good return this week and had 152 yards and a TD on 26 carries, and also caught 5 passes for 37 yards. Is this running game, of course, David Montgomery's out, and when he comes back, that'll be nice. Is it the strength of this Lions offense? Are you buying or selling, Jeff?
I'm buying this. I'm buying this because I think our offense runs through the run game, really. I mean, the offense is predicated on the play action pass, getting the offense. Yes. I do love Jared Goff, but like he excels with the play action pass. So if you get a bunch of people trying to stack the box, you can get some favorable matchups down the field. And we see that even with Montgomery out. I can tell we miss him. I mean, our red zone offense has struggled
Mhm.
quite a bit. I think Troy Aikman on the radio cast said that we run 60% of the time in the red zone. So Dan Campbell definitely wants this power running game to kind of be the engine of our offense. So it's going to be good. I agree with you. It's going to be great when David Montgomery's back and we have Gibbs here. It's a good 1-2 punch.
And Edward is agreeing here with you, Jeffrey. If they can't run, they can't pass. So definitely, I think it all routes to offensive success start with that backfield, and against the Raiders, they were able to take advantage of that. You know, it kind of almost feels as Spartan fans. We'll remember D'Antonio used to love just running the ball, and the
Yes.
only time we'd run into trouble is when we ran into teams where our offensive line couldn't dominate the line of scrimmage. And that's kind of what happened against the Ravens, was that we weren't able to dominate the line of scrimmage. So
Yeah. We had to start throwing early, and I as much as, like I said, much as I love Goff, I don't think he can be on a pass first team, at least with the way our team is set up.
Yeah, and we know he struggles under pressure too. And so when you're put in obvious passing situations and a defense can just pin their ears back and come after you, our offensive line, I think, is really good. But when a team knows that you're going to throw the ball and that you have to throw the ball, it makes it really difficult to execute, because they're just going to pin those ears back and come after you. So yeah, definitely put you in a tough position. And speaking of tough positions, we already talked about the impact of Kirk Cousins on the Vikings. And you hinted at it a little bit, Jeffrey, that you thought that the Lions should win the NFC North. But with that injury, is there any reason, any excuse you can think of why the Lions shouldn't be the NFC North champions now that Kirk Cousins is out for the season?
I am buying this, that we should wrap up this division. I mean, I think Josh Dobbs could be spicy unless they really unlock Josh Dobbs. The Vikings could pose a threat, but nothing of what the Bears have put out on the field impresses me. Nothing about what the Packers have put out on the field impresses me. So really, I mean, before Kirk went down, the Vikings were kind of for me, the scariest team in the North. Not too scary, obviously, but they were the spiciest team. So I'm definitely buying this.
Yeah, I'm buying as well. And obviously we'll have to reevaluate in the weeks to come, just because I think the only thing that could, I think, change this from being an expectation for me is injury, and it'd have to be some pretty catastrophic injuries to the Lions team. I'm not going to speak them into existence, but it would have to be pretty bad in order for me to have changed my expectations, because again, with Kirk Cousins out, I think you definitely take away a lot of the teeth from this Vikings team, and so the Lions are definitely, I think, the most talented team. They're playing the best football, and now they have their strongest opponent no longer has their best players. So it's division's garbage, as Edward points out here, and it's time for the Lions to sit upon that junk heap that is the NFC North. And so along those lines, okay, Lions, we say they're going to win the NFC North. Jeffrey, are you going to buy or sell here that the Lions will be able to hold on to the number 2 seed in the NFC? We're already saying, hey, they're going to be the NFC North champs. Does that mean they'll be able to? And I mean, you could do a buy plus and say they could steal the first number 1 seed away from the Philadelphia Eagles. But do you think the Lions will be able to sustain this down the road and really have a strong position in the NFC overall?
I'm absolutely buying this. San Francisco has looked very beatable in the past couple weeks. The Eagles haven't been as dominant. They had a good get-right game last week, but like you said earlier, the Commanders gave them all that they could handle. And I think they, like us, have weaknesses, but I think now that I'm seeing more of their body of work, I truly feel that we can hold it together. Our schedule is pretty favorable going forward as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we'll, it's hard to believe that we would win every single game going out there because we only play one team at this point that has a winning record, and that's Dallas in the last week. So it's going to be super interesting if we can rattle off a bunch of wins. I'm absolutely buying this.
Yeah, I think the two big things are going to be, can we beat Dallas? Because they're going to be a team that I could see competing for a high seed in the NFC. And then can we beat, or not can we beat, but what happens with Seattle? Because obviously Seattle has the head-to-head win over us, and right now they are currently sitting in first place in the NFC West. So one of them is kind of out of our hands. It depends on what the Seahawks do and how many games in the remainder of their season they win. And then again, the big thing for me is how we play against the Cowboys and can we get a victory there. I think those are really the two keys to us having a really good position towards the top of the NFC, and not just being the division winners. Um, Edward here didn't want to buy Jeffrey, but you sort of nailed it on the schedule.
All right.
He's saying they're going to end up as the 2, but not the 1. So we'll watch and see. But I think there's certainly a lot of great opportunity. And speaking of opportunity, if you ever wanted to be a head coach in the NFL, as we transition to our hot butts segment here, there is now a vacancy in the NFL. I probably would not take it if I was actually a head coaching candidate because I think the organization's a little dysfunctional. But you could be the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, as Josh McDaniels has been fired. And not only has Josh McDaniels been fired, but they also fired GM Dave Ziegler, and they're benching Jimmy G. So the Raiders going scorched earth. Yeah. So the hottest butt, as you predicted there, Jeffrey, Mr. Josh McDaniels.
Yeah, there were reports that he lost the locker room. You saw Devontae throw his helmet down in frustration after getting missed on 2 wide open passes. Jimmy G just isn't it. The rookie Aiden O'Connell showed much more promise, but this guy threw him under the bus after his first game. This guy has always just thrown his players under the bus, rubbed people the wrong way. He did the same thing in Denver, only lasted to his second season there. He ghosted Indianapolis when they were trying to sign him. This guy is just another failed Belichick tree coach.
Yeah, he's definitely, I think, a great example of how people try to. Him and Matt Patricia both are great examples. Of course, Matt Patricia being the one that us Lions fans are familiar with, but a great example of how people think that they can run things like Bill Belichick, but you're not Bill Belichick. You're not achieving the same levels of success he is. You don't have so you don't try and be someone you're not. And I think Josh McDaniels is probably better off as an offensive coordinator, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens if he ends up on that Patriots coaching staff again, as is often the case. Do you think when Bill Belichick finally hangs it up, you think maybe he gets his third shot as a head coach spot?
That would be interesting. I don't know what Kraft's feelings about it would be. I don't know if he actually likes Josh McDaniels, because it feels like Kraft and Belichick's relationship is very much like a mutual respect, but not necessarily one filled with chummery, as I would say. So that'd actually be spicy. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think you may be. I think you may be onto something there. I think he puts up with Belichick because of the fact that he has generated the results. So I think when that split finally happens, he finally may say, "Okay, we're done with that. It was good while it lasted, but I don't want to try and put in Belichick light with McDaniels and just go in a completely different direction." Taking a look here at the rest of our hot butts, of course, we still have Matt Eberflus, probably likely to get terminated at the end of the season. Riverboat Ron, of course, the Commanders were sold in this previous off season, so not likely to survive there unless the Commanders made a substantial playoff run. And unfortunately, even though they continue to give Philadelphia trouble, their overall record is not the greatest. So probably going to be the end of Riverboat Ron.
They were big time sellers in the trade deadline. They got rid of 2 of their best. I think their best players, really, than their linemen. And Ron Rivera, Riverboat Ron, he's just Ron now. He one of his strengths and one thing that he did was build up that defensive line, and those were two of his kind of not necessarily proteges, but those are two people he wanted on his team, and they're selling him. So I think he's going to be gone at the end of the season.
Yep, and Edward, echoing our feelings there about a massive rebuild with the new ownership. Likely casualty because of that. They'll want to put their own guy in and everything like that. So, he was probably doomed anyways, but I think the play certainly hasn't helped him out too much. Brian Dabble with the Giants. He just continued to look bad, and could definitely find himself on the chopping block as well. Obviously, we also have Danny Dimes there behind him,
yes.
Who's been injured with that neck injury. But that could be another situation where you maybe look to start with a new QB, new head coach. Be interesting.
They paid him a lot of money, though. I don't know if they'll be able to offload that contract on anybody.
They did give him that $40 million, so it'll be interesting. Have to see how they spin that. Of course, we talked about Belichick, them having not the greatest season, potentially his final one with the Patriots, but we'll have to see how things play out. Mike Vrabel could be saved by Will Levis, depending on what they're able to do.
Yes, the Mayo Man.
Moving him further back in the list. And then I think at this point, Frank Reich, he got that win. I think he'll probably be safe. They'll give him probably at least one more year to see if he can continue to help Bryce Young develop. I think Brandon Staley here with the Chargers is a very interesting one. Depending on what the Chargers do, I think he can save himself. But at the moment, definitely if they don't make the playoffs, he's in a spicy situation. And then I think, Jeffrey, for your consideration, I have him here. I've put him as safe. He was on our list. I think we should take him off.
I agree.
Kevin O'Connell. They won 3 in a row. He turned that team around, got them back to 4-4. I think with the Kirk Cousins injury, that sort of changes expectations for the seasons for the Vikings. Obviously, you pointed out, they traded for Josh Dobbs, and I think they'll still want to see the team continue to perform. But I think the injury, the job he was able to do over the last couple of weeks, I think that sort of kills the fire underneath him for this season. And should buy him at least one more season at the helm of the Vikings. So with your permission, Jeffrey, I will remove from consideration.
Happy trails, KOC.
He can survive, and maybe we'll see what happens with him next year. Oh, a spicy take here from Edward, going out on a limb, thinking that with Cousins going or being traded, that they may go in a different direction. So that definitely
that could be interesting. I mean, a 36-year-old quarterback. I mean, I did say earlier that I thought he has got a couple seasons left in him, but do the other GMs think that he does? That's an interesting one.
Could be spicy to see what it will be spicy to see what the Vikings do this offseason. And of course, Kings of the North, our next segment here. Thankfully, it's been a steady rule so far this season. The Lions, of course, are your current king in the North. We're 6-2. We're on a 1-game winning streak. Minnesota is the only other team on a winning streak, and they actually have a streak. They've won 3. But of course, as we've talked about at length during today's episode, Kirk Cousins is out. The Packers are on a 4-game losing streak and just look like ass, booty, whatever you want to call it. Not good. And then the Bears, they got that 1 win with the Division II rookie quarterback. But the Chargers aren't the Raiders, and so they're not quite as dysfunctional. And they, of course, were able to get that win at home against a quarterback who is definitely a long shot and an interesting guy to trot out there as your starting QB. So long may the Lions rule as we continue to be the kings in the North. So yeah. That leads us into today's episode. Of course, is going to be a little quicker because it's not actually. We're going about the same speed as usual, even though we don't have as much to talk about because the Lions are on a bye week this week. So we'll just quickly, Jeffrey, get your thoughts here about that game against the Raiders, and then we'll call it. Well, we got our champs and chumps, and then we are good to move on. So obviously, we've talked about the final score there already. The Lions getting that win, 26-14. The Raiders only scored one offensive touchdown. The other touchdown was a pick six that Goff threw to Marcus Peters. And really, if that pick six hadn't happened, I think the score would have definitely reflected more. So the game was really one-sided if you look at the box score, right? The Lions had a lot more yards. The Raiders struggled. Of course, we know they didn't complete a pass to a wide receiver in the first half.
They have Davante Adams.
And they have Davante Adams and Jacoby Myers.
Yeah.
Their defense looked pretty good. Max Crosby, seeing a EMU graduate terrorize the Lions team was not a lot of fun. Certainly, if we wanted to free him from them roster and pair him with Hutchinson,
I would absolutely love him on this team.
That could be a lot of fun. And of course, Joe had mentioned last week that one of the things that he wasn't liking what he had seen out of the Lions was the fact that they were settling for a lot of field goals and weren't able to get touchdowns. And I think, the Raiders, they're not a good team, right? They fired their head coach for a reason. They've been struggling. And I think you can get away with beating a team like the Raiders in that fashion. But if we were playing Philadelphia or Kansas City or one of the teams that we know we're likely to see in the playoffs, I don't know if the performance the Lions put in on Sunday or on Monday would have been enough to beat a team like that. I think you have to do a better job of converting those opportunities into touchdowns as opposed to field goals. But I mean, there was a lot to like. I think the defense played really well. We saw 3 sacks from the defensive line. We saw 3 sacks from the linebackers and the safeties. McNeil in particular, I'll talk about him a little bit later in my champ, but he definitely stepped up. So we saw a quieter game from Aiden Hutchinson, but it was nice to see that with Hutchinson getting the double teams and drawing the attention from the offensive line, that other players were stepping up and making some plays. And then, of course, Gibbs had a very strong game. I think my favorite meme that I saw from the game was there's that clip from SpongeBob where he thinks he's become like a singer or performer, and all the fish at the Krusty Krab want him to make Krabby Patties, but he won't do it because he thinks he's a performer. And then he puts them on the grill, and everyone starts to go crazy, like, this is what we've been waiting for. I've seen that, but instead on top of the patties, they just put Jahmyr Gibbs' picture. And so it was like Lions fans and Dan Campbell, and it being like, okay, this is what they want. So they just keep giving, keep jumping Jahmyr Gibbs on the fire. So, I think it was a lot of encouraging things. Again, I think if we were playing a better quality team, I definitely, there were some notes. But Jeffrey, what are your overall thoughts about the Monday night game against the Raiders?
Yeah, I agree with you on the field goals. And I think having David Montgomery back, having that red zone power running game going, I think is something we've been missing without him there. Gibbs is good, and this was a coming out party for Gibbs. But when it comes to just powering it in, bouncing off of people, carrying people with you into the end zone, Montgomery was doing that in spades early in the season. I think that's just something that we were missing there. But I think, like you said, the Raiders are bad. Max Crosby is an absolute beast, but he can't do it alone, despite how much havoc he wreaks in the backfield pretty much every play. But yeah, we need to turn these field goals into touchdowns. Otherwise, against these good teams, kind of what Edward said here in the chat, it'll hurt us against good teams, because even though the Raiders got within 1 score, I never felt like they could ever win this game because we were dominating them so much. But if we're settling for field goals against the Eagles, like that, we gotta convert those into tutties.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing that I found was that too, a lot of the like highlights and recaps that I was reading about the game was that a lot of people kept referring to Detroit as having a massive weapons cache when it came to the offense, and I definitely think, from a backfield perspective, especially once we get David Montgomery back, having Montgomery and Gibbs, that's going to be a great 1-2 punch. Obviously, we know Amon-Ra St. Brown is fantastic. Sam Laporta has come out and really been a very nice piece that we added through the draft. And I think Reynolds, Raymond, some of the other wide receivers, we've seen them step up and get the job done, but we haven't. I would still say we're probably missing that secondary threat from the receiver position. So I think again the Lions taking a shot on Donovan Peoples-Jones, bringing him in for a sixth round pick in the 2025 draft. That could be very interesting. Of course, we'd love to see Jameson Williams reliably become that sort of secondary option at the receiver position.
Yeah, he was getting boo birds on that pass he dropped. He did catch a really nice pass in traffic and held on to that.
He did.
He does go out for blocks, even though he got absolutely blown up by Max Crosby on one of those plays. But yeah, people were booing him when he dropped that pass, and I was like, "Ooh, that's not what we want to see for a rookie." But sometimes this game in the NFL, you have to perform at some point. So he's got to get a lot better. But I do agree with you on the Donovan Peoples-Jones. He's definitely a Dan Campbell guy. He's a physical receiver. He loves blocking, which with this team, like you need to make blocks in the run game before you're going to get looks in the pass game for sure. And he's a Michigan native, so he's come home to hopefully lead the Lions to the promised land here.
Yeah, I think we need to come up with a Dan Campbell equivalent of like a Gruden grinder, because obviously yes. Those emails make being a Gruden grinder.
Yeah, I know.
It's a little dicey, but he's definitely he fits that mold, and so we need to come up with a clever name for Dan Campbell like guys, because I think they sort of like those same types of players, and certainly excited to see what he can do, what he brings to the table, and really just again having another weapon. On the outside, I think it will go a long way to help out this team. So whether it be in the long run Williams or it's DPJ, certainly willing to entertain whichever one can get the job done. So yeah, I mean, obviously we're in a good position, 6-2, second place in the NFC, headed into this bye week. We can get healthy. We saw the difference that a week made for Joey Burrow and getting healthy with Cincinnati. So I think we got very lucky with the fact that we have the bye week in week 9 too. That's sort of a good spot. Not too early in the season, not too late. It certainly helps us out as we look to make a run. And of course, our next game once we're back from the bye is against the Chargers. So we'll continue hopefully our domination of the AFC West. But our next couple opponents here in November, we have the Chargers, we have the Bears, and then, of course, we're taking the Packers and playing them on Thanksgiving Day in Detroit. So 2 home games, 1 away. Certainly a chance here. And against those 2 home games, of course, against our NFC North opponents who aren't very good. So a chance here to improve to 9-2 before December. How does that tickle you, Jeffrey? Are you excited about that?
I've literally never experienced anything like that in my life, because I've been a Lions fan my whole football fandom career, I guess, when I started middle school. And just like being in this position and feeling good about the team and the talent level and how we're playing. It's not like, we had some good players but poor coaching or bad defense or Matt Stafford's hurt. All this stuff we went through all those years is like we're here, and we're like talked about as an elite team at the top. So it's certainly going to be a great holiday season for us.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what happens, and depending on how things go, we don't play the Vikings until Christmas Eve, and a victory there could, we potentially, if we win out up until then, we could be in a great spot to have already claimed the NFC North. But definitely a victory on Christmas Eve against the Vikings in Minnesota, that could be pretty spicy and a good holiday treat for Lions fans who have been very patient with this team over the years. Let's go quickly, Jeffrey, and talk about our champs and chumps from the previous week. I sort of highlighted my champ a little bit earlier, but Alan McNeil, I think he did a fantastic job there against the Raiders. He had a career high pressure, or he was able to pressure on a career high 35.3% of his pass rushes and also secured 2 sacks in that process. So he was a big part of making Jimmy G uncomfortable on Monday night. And then my chump is the Raiders passing game. Not only, we talked about it's everybody, because I think there's blame to go around. Jimmy G, they have we've already talked about the fact that they have both Jacoby Myers and Devontae Adams as wide receivers. They also have Hunter Renfrow, who in his rookie season was looking like the next Wes Welker. He was a guy actually that I wanted to see potential. I mean, we already have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who does a great job in the slot, but like depending on what the asking price for him would be, that's a guy that I would really love almost any team that needs a receiver to take a flyer on, because I think he's kind of being wasted there in Oakland. And then, of course, they also brought in the rookie tight end out of Notre Dame, Myers, as well. So they have plenty of talent at the receiver position. Just it seems like it's a failure at every level, from the players to the coaching staff to the scheme to everything. So that the Raiders passing game, that's my chump, because that was to not have a completion to a wide receiver in a entire half of football and not have that be by choice. It's not like they just ran the ball every time. They were throwing, they just didn't complete the passes.
Oh yeah, Devontae Adams dropped one. I mean, it was just rough all around. But yeah. I think our chumps are going to share the same subject matter.
Well, who do you got this week?
So I'll start with my chump this week, Josh McDaniels. I mean, he trotted out the corpse of Jimmy G. He's a handsome man. I'll give him that. That's a great jawline he's got, but he cannot keep up anymore. His back clearly is affecting him. Aiden O'Connell gives him the best chance to win. I mean, as soon as McDaniels got fired, the interim head coach named AOC the starter and benching Jimmy. He was just awful to his players. People were about to mutiny. He's my chump of the week. And my champ of the week is after Jahmyr Gibbs scored a touchdown, he ran up to the crowd and tried to jump in. And this lady in Detroit picked him up. That was nuts. She had like no leverage. She only used her upper body. She picked up a full-grown man football player.
Just arm pressed awesome. Him, man. Just lifted him up.
Nuts. And she didn't break a sweat. She just turned him around and started celebrating. She's my absolute champ of the week.
Let's see who Edward has here for his champ. He has
yes,
Jersey State champs, and his chumps, the Giants, losing a god-awful game to the Jets. Those are fine picks there. Edward. And it's funny, Jeffrey, you mentioned Jimmy Garoppolo being good looking. My sister Mary just discovered for the first time the other day on Monday night that he is in fact a good looking guy, and was surprised by that. Yeah,
never seen him without his helmet off. Huh?
It's pretty known. He's got it going on. Jimmy G, good looking guy. Not great quarterback,
no,
but he's a good looking dude.
Yeah, he had one good season when he got to the Super Bowl. I think he's not gonna like light it up. He's definitely more of he's not gonna elevate people around him. He needs a good supporting cast to succeed. But yeah, towards the end of his career, what I think it might be towards the end of his career here, he's just not looking good.
Yeah, I think he's had a lot of injuries throughout the years. I think more than most QBs have. And I think they've definitely have a stacking negative multiplier on him. So it's unfortunate because he definitely at times has shown flashes of being a very competent quarterback. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens next for him, if he gets some another try down the road here, or if this is going to be the final pages in the book of Jimmy G as a starter. Another one of those storylines we'll have to keep an eye on here.
Now, I do have to say, it might be a chump of the week next week, maybe. Spoiler alert, but I haven't seen your dad around here naysaying the Lions in the comments.
He
was there first couple weeks, but I don't see him here now.
He's been claiming that he hasn't been receiving the notifications.
Oh yeah,
when the Lions grid is,
he knows.
When the Lions grid is going live, which is, as you point out, a great time to mention that whether you are a fan of YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, or Twitter, if you go ahead and like the Lions grid profile, And for YouTube in particular, smash that bell so you get notified when we go live with these episodes. You will be able to stay up to date with all the latest happenings here at the Lions Grid. Of course, it's always, as Edward knows, he's got it down.
Yes.
We go live Thursdays at 7:30.
That's
That's
right.
when it happens. Although, Edward, I should point out there is one exception to that rule, and that will be before the Packers game. That, of course, is on Thursday. So if we do that at our usual Thursday at 7:30 spot, the game will have already happened. Plus, it's Thanksgiving, so we want to let everybody enjoy their Thanksgiving. But we'll be actually doing that game the Tuesday before. So for that one, it'll be on what is that? That's the 21st, because the 23rd is Thanksgiving. So that is the only exception. Otherwise, Edward is absolutely right. Thursdays at 7:30 before Thursday Night Football. You can catch us here doing the Lions Grid, and we definitely appreciate your support. Thanks for tuning in and being an active audience. We always appreciate the participation. And Jeffrey, anything left for you before we call it an evening?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. It's been a pretty cool year in the NFL. Lots of parity going on. I've been really enjoying the season so far. Not just because the Lions are doing really well.
Well, that doesn't hurt.
No. Yes,
as someone who's been doing this show for 7 years, having a Lions team that is actually doing well makes it so much more enjoyable. Because when those dark Matt Patricia years,
oh man,
it got hard sometimes every week, turning it on and being like, well, we still suck. But it's definitely much more refreshing being able to celebrate victories and come on here and have some energy. So as Edward points out, well, hopefully the Lions will continue to get healthy during this offseason, and we'll catch you next Thursday before the Lions take on the Chargers. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And of course, I should mention that in terms of Pick'em, we're all still sitting at 6-2. We all chose the Lions to beat the Raiders. So me, Joe, and Jeff are still tied right there at 6-2. Unless someone does something spicy with the Chargers game, I imagine we'll probably stay the same. But we'll see. We'll see. Until then, I'm Kevin Marheine. He's Jeffrey Raymond. Thanks for tuning into the Lions Grid, and we'll catch you next Thursday at 7:30. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
I can find the button.